I found a stranger on my Netflix account last night. It wasn't a phone bill or a lipstick stain. It was a notification on my iPad. It was 3:17 in the morning. I was lying in our bedroom in the dark. The rain was hammering against the glass of our 20th story window. Seattle rain is different than anywhere else. It's relentless and gray, just like my mood has been lately. I reached out and tapped the screen to kill the bright light, but the notification wasn't an email or a calendar reminder. It was the Netflix interface. The prompt asked who's watching, and right there next to my profile was a new name. The name was Baby Cat. The icon was a crudely drawn cartoon cat with big green eyes. We live in a 2-bedroom condo in downtown Seattle. It's all glass and concrete and very sterile. Just me, my husband Sterling, and a lot of expensive furniture. And Sterling hates cats. He is violently allergic to anything with fur. He claims they destroy the structural integrity of upholstery. He calls them biological weapons that shed dander everywhere. He literally sneezes if he walks past a cat owner on the street. So, I'm asking you, who the hell is Baby Cat? I looked at the timestamp on the activity log. The profile had been active just 10 minutes ago, 3 a.m. I looked over at the empty space next to me in bed. The sheets were cold and pulled back. Sterling was supposed to be in Portland for a conference. Portland is a 3-hour drive on a good day, but someone was watching Netflix in my living room right now. Or maybe he was here and left in the middle of the night. You know that feeling when your gut just screams at you? That cold, heavy dread in the pit of your stomach? I tried to tell myself it was a glitch. Maybe a hacked account or a system error. But hacked accounts don't usually create custom profiles with cute names. They don't curate a my list. I thought about Sterling's schedule for the last 6 months. He's been working late on the new stadium project. He's been distant, distracted, always on his phone. Whenever I suggested a movie, he was too exhausted. He said his brain was fried from load-bearing calculations. He said he needed to decompress in silence. I could feel my heart rate picking up. My chest felt tight. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the iPad. The metal casing felt slippery against my sweating palms. I hovered my finger over the remove profile button. I wanted to just delete it and pretend I never saw it. Ignorance is a form of structural support, right? If you ignore the crack, the building doesn't fall down immediately. But architects don't ignore cracks in the foundation. We inspect them. We measure them. We find the source of the failure before it collapses. I tapped the cartoon cat face instead of deleting it. The screen opened to the My List row, and there they were. Rows and rows of romantic comedies, the exact same movies I'd asked him to watch with me. The ones he told me were mindless dribble. He said they lacked narrative integrity, but they were right there, watched and paused halfway through. I just stared at the bright screen in the dark room. The blue light illuminated the dust on my bedside table. The silence in the apartment was deafening. The math didn't math. The structural integrity was gone. And honestly, I want to know what you would have done. Would you have deleted it? Because what I found next changed everything. And this is where it gets really messed up. My thumb hovered over the who's watching screen. That crude drawing of a cat stared back at me. Green eyes. Mocking me. I'm sitting here in the dark. The blue light from the iPad is the only thing illuminating my face. It's 3:20 a.m. now. He told me he was in Portland tonight. A late meeting with a prospective client. That's the script. That's always the script. But this usage log, it says the movie was played from this IP address. From our condo. So if he's in Portland who is watching Sleepless in Seattle in my living room, unless he isn't in Portland, unless he's here, hiding, in the apartment he supposedly pays for with his hedge fund money. Let me back up. To understand the house, you have to look at the foundation. Sterling sold me on his openness before we even got married. We shared everything. Location data, calendar events, grocery lists. I remember the day he set it all up. 2010. October 14th. It was raining, of course. We were in the kitchen of that drafty rental we had in Capitol Hill. He was hunched over his laptop. I remember the smell of his coffee. Black, bitter. He turned the screen toward me. Look, he said, one digital life, no secrets. He imported my contacts. He synced my photos. He made it feel safe, structured, like a building with a solid core. But then came the exception, the business folder. It sat right there on the shared dashboard, a locked gray box. Whenever my mouse drifted near it, he'd get this look. Cold, Sharp, he'd snatched the laptop away. NDA, Zora, you don't want to get sued. I believed him. I respected his work. He handled the infrastructure. I handled the aesthetics. He called it a clean partition. He said his clients demanded absolute isolation. I thought he meant firewalls. I thought he meant encryption. I didn't think he meant a wall between us. Has anyone else ever had that gut feeling? The one where you know something is wrong but you ignore it because the truth is too heavy to lift? You know what's funny? He manages that cloud account obsessively. If I buy a pair of shoes, the receipt hits the shared folder instantly. He knows what I spend. He knows where I eat. He tracks my location in real time. I thought it was love, or maybe just convenience. Now looking at this iPad, I realize it was surveillance. He had eyes on everything, except I couldn't see into the gray box. The math didn't. Math. The structural integrity was gone. He always said he needed a clean partition for his high-stakes clients. I thought he meant hedge funds in Bellevue. I didn't realize he meant a separate life. I couldn't breathe in that bedroom anymore. The walls felt like they were closing in. I grabbed my laptop and walked to the kitchen. The floorboards were cold under my bare feet. I sat on a bar stool at the island. The room was dark, illuminated only by the blue light from my screen. Rain was tapping against the glass. It was a steady Seattle drizzle. I opened the Netflix account settings. I wasn't looking at movies anymore. I was looking for a pattern. You know that feeling when the math just doesn't math? That was me. I needed to find the numbers that made sense of this insanity. I clicked on viewing activity for the baby cat profile. The list was pages long. It wasn't just rom-coms at 3 a.m. It was daytime television. Say Yes to the Dress. House Hunters. Love is Blind. These were shows Sterling claimed to despise. He called them brain rot whenever I watched them. But here he was, binge-watching them. I looked at the timestamps. Tuesday, 2:15 p.m. He was supposed to be in a high-stakes client meeting in Fremont. Thursday, 11:45 a.m. He texted me saying, still stuck in the zoning board hearing. The Netflix log shows he was watching Say Yes to the Dress for 3 hours straight. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the computer. I took a deep breath. I needed to be an architect again. I needed to look at the structural integrity of his lies. I scrolled down to the device information. The stream was coming from a smart TV, a Samsung 55-inch. I logged into our Amazon Prime account. I searched for Samsung TVs. There it was, purchased 6 months ago, delivered to a UPS store mailbox in Capitol Hill. Not to his office, not to our home. He bought a TV for someone else. He bought it with our joint credit card. The receipt showed 499 points severs plus tax. And honestly, I want to know what you would have done. Would you have woken him up, or would you have kept digging like I did? I couldn't stop. I needed to know who was watching that TV. Who was Baby Cat? I went back to the Netflix IP log. The IP address was a residential node in Capitol Hill. But it wasn't static. On Tuesday, the location was 15th and John. On Wednesday, it was 19th and Thomas. The coordinates were shifting. A residential node that moves isn't a house. It's a hotspot, or a VPN, or someone who doesn't stay in one place. I looked at the bedroom door down the hall. It was closed. Sterling was in there, sleeping, or pretending to sleep. I felt a chill run up my spine that had nothing to do with the rain. He told me he was working late on the Fremont Tower project, but the IP addresses place him in a residential neighborhood. Watching wedding shows, I copied the most recent IP address into a geolocation tool. I hit enter. The map loaded on my screen. The pin dropped on a quiet street in Capitol Hill, but then I refreshed the page. The pin jumped 2 blocks east. The IP address wasn't matching his office. It was matching a residential node in Capitol Hill, a residential node that moved around. The deadbolt turned. That heavy metallic click echoed through the silent living room. It was 3:45 a.m. I slammed my laptop shut. The geolocation map vanished. Sterling walked in. He was shaking off his black umbrella. Rain dripped onto the hardwood floor. He looked at me. He didn't seem surprised to see me awake. He just looked tired. Zora, he said. His voice was soft. Too soft. Why are you sitting in the dark? I didn't answer. I just watched him. I felt like I was looking at a blueprint that had been altered. Something fundamental was wrong with the structure. I'm sorry, he said. He hung up his coat. The Fremont project is a nightmare. Mr. Henderson refused to sign off on the steel beams. We were on site until 2 in the morning. I stood up. My legs felt numb. I walked over to him. I know the Vermont project. The steel was signed off last week. He was lying. The structural integrity of his story was gone. He reached out to hug me. I'm exhausted, Zora. It's been a hell of a week. I leaned in. I pressed my face against his chest, and then I smelled it. It wasn't the rain. It wasn't his cedarwood cologne. It was vanilla. Cheap, chemical vanilla, like a cupcake factory explosion. I haven't worn vanilla scents in a decade. I haven't worn anything but Joe Malone in years. Have you ever smelled another woman on your husband? It triggers a physical nausea. Like motion sickness, but in your soul. I pulled back. I looked at his collar. There was a smear of foundation. Not my shade. My foundation is porcelain. This was a deep tan. You smell like pastries, I said. I tried to keep my voice steady. He laughed. It sounded hollow. Funny. I must have brushed against a bakery truck on the commute. A bakery truck? At 3 a.m.? In an industrial district? The math didn't math. If you've ever been gaslit, you know this feeling. He thinks I'm stupid. He thinks I'm just a little wife who doesn't understand his big, important world. Well, I said, go get some sleep. I stepped back into the shadows. He turned toward the stairs. He started unbuttoning his shirt. He was walking away from me. And then gravity did its job. A white tissue fell from his jacket pocket. It drifted down to the marble floor. It landed right next to his shoe. I looked down. My breath stopped. It was crumpled, but I could see the stain clearly, a lip print. Bright, fire engine red. I were nude. I were mauve. I never wear red. That lip print wasn't mine. I watched him climb the stairs. He had no idea he just handed me the demolition permit. I waited 45 minutes. The silence in our bedroom was deafening. I could hear his breathing change, slow, rhythmic. He was finally asleep. The vanilla perfume still hung in the air. It was sickeningly sweet. Like cheap detergent trying to cover something up. I looked at the tissue on the marble floor. Fire engine red lipstick. A crime scene I had to process before I could move. I slipped out from under the duvet. My feet hit the cold hardwood. I didn't look at the bed. I couldn't look at him. The ensuite bathroom door clicked shut behind me. I leaned against the marble vanity. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped his gym bag. You know that feeling when you're about to cross a line? When you know there's no going back? Sterling always kept this bag separate. His crypto investment phone. That's what he called it. The bag was always locked. Tonight, the zipper was partially open. A structural failure. I reached inside. My fingers brushed against something cold. Metal. Black plastic. I pulled it out. A second phone. A burner. I stared at the screen. 4012 a.m. 3 missed calls, all from the same number. Cap Hill Storage. Capitol Hill Storage. We didn't have a storage unit. I remember him telling me about crypto. Privacy is key, Zora. You can't build wealth without protecting your assets. The math didn't math then. It really didn't math now. And this is where it gets really messed up. I slid the phone into my pocket. My heart was pounding in my throat. I opened the bathroom door just an inch. Darkness. His breathing hadn't changed. I walked to the guest bathroom down the hall, closed the door, locked it, sat on the edge of the bathtub. My thumb hovered over the voicemail icon. I pressed it. This is a reminder for Unit 402 at Capitol Hill Storage. Your rent is 3 days overdue. Please update your payment method or your unit will be subject to auction on the 1st of the month. Automated, clinical, unemotional, just like him. I played it again. Unit 402, 3 days overdue. Auction? The words swirled around in my head. Storage unit? We didn't have a storage unit. We had a 3-car garage. We had a basement. Both were full of his junk. His collectibles. His investments. Why did he need Unit 402? I know what you're thinking. Girl, why didn't you just ask him? If you've ever been in this position, you know why. You know that moment when your gut screams the truth, but your brain is still trying to build a case? Trying to find the structural flaw before the whole building collapses? I looked at the call log again. 12 calls from Cap Hill Storage in the last month. 5 incoming, 7 outgoing. What was in Unit 402? And honestly, I want to know what you would have done, because I still don't know if calling that number back was the right call. My thumb hovered over the call button. Green button, red button. The choice felt heavier than it should. If this story is hitting close to home for you, I just want you to know you're not alone. And it does get better. But first, it gets worse. I press call. Ring, ring, ring. Capitol Hill Storage. How can I help you? I froze. I hadn't prepared a script. Architects always have a plan, always have blueprints. I had nothing. Hello? Is anyone there? I ended the call. Storage unit? We didn't have a storage unit. We had a 3-car garage and a basement full of his junk. Why did he need unit 402? I shoved the burner phone back into the side pocket. My palms were sweating, leaving damp marks on my nylon. I crept out of the bedroom and closed the door silently. The hallway was dark, lit only by the streetlights outside. I needed to think. I needed to work. I went into my home office and shut the door. It was 4:15 a.m. The blue light from the computer monitors made the room feel underwater. I sat at my drafting table. The surface was cold against my forearms. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the screenshot of the Netflix profile again. That crude drawing of a cat, the big green eyes. I wondered if Sterling drew it himself. It looked like a child's doodle. Or maybe he found it somewhere. In architecture, we trace every line back to its origin. Nothing exists in a vacuum. I decided to treat the drawing like a structural flaw. I ran a reverse image search. The progress bar spun on the screen. It felt like an eternity. Then the results populated. Pages of generic clip art, cartoons, stock photos, and then, at the bottom, a match. Instagram. I clicked the link. The app opened, flashing white light in my eyes. The handle was Catalina Living. That name, it sounded so innocent. So domestic, but it made my skin crawl. The profile was private. Just a gray silhouette where a face should be. 0 posts visible to the public. But people make mistakes. They leave digital debris. I clicked the tagged photos tab. It's a common oversight. One result. A photo of a wooden table at a restaurant, 2 hands holding mugs. Bloody Marys. I zoomed in on the hands. The one on the left had a ring. Not a wedding band. It was a gold signet ring with a black stone. I know that ring. Sterling bought it last year. I tapped the location tag above the mugs. Pike Place Market. The timestamp was last Tuesday at 1 p.m. Last Tuesday. I remember specifically because he canceled our dinner plans. He said he was in the Fremont office all day. He told me he had a late lunch with the engineers. He came home smelling like cheap perfume. I felt a coldness spread through my chest. It wasn't jealousy. It was the clarity of structural failure. A bridge doesn't fall all at once. It starts with a crack, a tiny fracture in the steel. I was building a case against him, stone by stone, lie by lie, and now I had the blueprint. Have you ever found a tiny detail that just unraveled everything? Let me know in the comments if you caught a liar this way. I saved the screenshot. I sent it to my private cloud. Then I heard a floorboard creak in the hallway. My heart stopped. I held my breath. The house was silent again. Just the radiator humming. The profile was private, but the location tag on the brunch photo was public. Pike Place Market. And the date? Last Tuesday, during his client meeting. The floorboard groaned again. I froze in the office chair. My hand hovered over the mouse. The screen was still glowing with Catalina's profile. You know that feeling when your heart stops and then starts hammering against your ribs? That was me. I pressed my lips together tight. The hallway was pitch black through the cracked door. I listened hard. Silence, just the hum of the refrigerator down the hall. The house was settling. It was just the house. I let out a shaky breath. My hands were trembling on the keyboard. I had to keep going. I couldn't stop now. The adrenaline was keeping me awake. Catalina's profile was set to private, but her friend list, wide open to the public. I started scrolling. There were hundreds of names. Most of them strangers, young, professional. And honestly, I want to know what you would have done. Because scrolling through your husband's mistress's friends at 4 a.m., it hits different than I ever expected. Then I saw it. A profile for someone named Jenna Marie. The profile picture was a selfie. 2 girls, bright cocktails in hand. One of them was Catalina. The other had dark hair. I clicked through. Her posts were public. Thank God for people who overshare everything about their lives. I scrolled back 3 months, post after post of brunches, workouts, happy hours. There it was, a tagged photo that someone had reposted. The caption read, "Girls' night at the new place." That view, though, the image showed a balcony at night. I could see the Space Needle glowing orange against the dark sky. But what caught my eye was the railing. Distinctive brushed metal, vertical bars with a horizontal crossbar every 6 inches. I'd know that detail anywhere. I'd sketched something similar for a project years ago. The location tag said The Sovereign on Broadway, a luxury high-rise in the heart of Capitol Hill. I zoomed in on the photo. The timestamp was October 15th. Last month, Sterling told me he was in Portland for a conference that weekend. He said the hotel had terrible Wi-Fi. That's why he barely called. The math didn't math. I sat back in the chair. The leather creaked beneath me. The Sovereign. I know that building. I remember the blueprints spread across my drafting table. The glass curtain wall, the load-bearing columns hidden in the drywall. I designed the lobby layout for a firm that bid on it 10 years ago. We lost the contract to some flashy New York firm, but I know every blind spot. I know which cameras cover the garage entrance. I know which elevators require key fobs. And I know the rent is $5,000 a month. If the story is hitting close to home for you, I just want you to know, you're not alone. The lies make you question your own sanity. But first, you have to get the proof. Before I tell you what I did next, I want you to guess. Where would you go first? Because I promise you, nobody saw this coming. I didn't go back to sleep. I just showered, pulled on black slacks, and grabbed my keys. It was 4:45 a.m. The condo was silent. I slipped out through the service elevator so I wouldn't wake him. I needed to get eyes on the target before he did. At 6 a.m., I called my office. I told my assistant Dave there was a structural failure in Portland. I said the foundation was shifting, total fabrication, but I used my serious voice. The one I used for zoning boards. He bought it. I drove straight to Capitol Hill. The rain was pounding the I-5 bridge. That rhythmic tapping on the roof usually calms me. Today it sounded like a countdown. I parked my Audi across the street from the Sovereign on Broadway. It's a brutalist concrete monster. Cold. Unforgiving. Ironic, really. I helped bid on the retrofit for this building 5 years ago. We lost the contract, but I still memorized the floor plans. I know the building's bones. I know the blind spots. I know where the security cameras overlap. I remembered the brushed metal railing from the photo. I looked for it on the balcony of the penthouse unit. There it was, distinctive vertical bars, a horizontal crossbar. The math was finally mathing. I turned off my engine. I sat in the silence. I had a travel mug of black coffee. It was stone cold by 8,000 am, but I didn't care. I wasn't here for comfort. I was here to witness. The math didn't math, and I needed to find the error in the equation. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, a text from Sterling, checking in. Hope the site visit goes well. I stared at his name on the screen. The nerve, the absolute structural audacity of this man. He's texting me while he's likely packing a bag for her. I wanted to smash the phone against the dashboard. Instead, I tossed it into the glove box and waited, and this is where it gets really boring. If you've never done surveillance, let me tell you, it's 90% sheer boredom and 10% sheer terror. My back ached against the leather seat, my stomach growled, but I didn't move. I watched the front door, I watched the garage entrance, I watched the people walking dogs in the rain. Every time a silver car passed, my heart rate spiked. Then, at 10:15 a.m., the Tesla appeared. It glided down Broadway like a shark in dark water. I grabbed my phone. I held it steady against the steering wheel. I hit record. My hand was trembling. The car slowed down. It signaled left. It turned into the underground garage ramp. I zoomed in on the windshield. The morning light hit the glass perfectly. There he was. Sterling. He looked relaxed, happy. He wasn't wearing his wedding ring. And then I saw the passenger seat, a woman, long dark hair. She turned her head to look at him. She was laughing. Then she leaned in. She kissed him on the cheek. Just a casual Tuesday morning peck. She touched his arm. A familiar gesture. The way a wife touches her husband when they are running late. I felt like I was standing on a girder 100 feet up in the air. And the wind just started blowing. My breath caught in my throat, a jagged gasp. I couldn't breathe. The air in the car suddenly felt too thick. Suffocating. The red taillights faded into the black mouth of the garage. They were gone. I stopped recording. I dropped the phone onto the floor mat. I just sat there, looking at the empty street. The rain started coming down harder. He wasn't going to work. He was going home. To another home. and I just watched him walk into it with another woman. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the key fob. I gasped for air like I was drowning. The panic attack came out of nowhere, just like that. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. One deep breath, then another. You know that feeling? When your body completely rejects what your brain just saw? I had to pull myself together. I had a job to do. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Red eyes, pale skin. I look like a ghost. But Zora Beaumont doesn't break. I put the car in drive and headed toward the Sovereign. It's a building I know intimately. I worked on the bid 5 years ago. The service entrance was behind the loading dock on Thomas Street. I saw a delivery truck pulling in. Perfect timing. I slipped in behind it. The garage gate was already lifting. I followed the truck down the ramp. My heart was pounding in my throat. The concrete walls smelled of exhaust and cold air. I parked in the visitor spot near the service elevators. The regular elevators required a key card. But the service elevators? Those are for deliveries, maintenance, housekeeping. I walked to the service elevator bank. My heels clicked on the concrete floor. The doors were brushed steel with a small keypad. I remembered the override code from the blueprints. 4 digits. The same code they used during construction. My fingers hovered over the buttons. This was it. The point of no return. I pressed the numbers. 4729. The light turned green. The doors opened with a soft chime. I stepped inside and hit the button for the 14th floor. My hands were sweating. I wiped them on my slacks. The elevator rose smoothly. Too smoothly. I watched the numbers light up. Floor 3, floor 7, floor 10, floor 14. I stepped out into the hallway. It was eerily quiet. The carpet was thick and gray. The walls were painted a soft beige. Everything about this place screamed expensive. But it felt wrong, sterile, like a movie set rather than a home. I remembered the Instagram photo, the Space Needle in the background, the brushed metal railing. That meant the unit faced west. I turned left down the hallway. My footsteps were silent now. Unit 1401, 1401, 1403, 1405. The numbers were rising. I was getting closer. 1411, 1413. 1415, and then I saw it, Unit 1417. The door was painted a glossy black. A wreath of dried eucalyptus hung on the front. My stomach twisted into a knot. This is it. This is where he brought her, where they drank their Bloody Marys and watched romantic comedies. I stood in the hallway for a full minute, just staring at that black door. Part of me wanted to run, to get back in my car and drive home, and pretend I never saw any of this. But the other part? The architect in me, the woman who built structures for a living, she needed to see the foundation. She needed to see where the cracks were. I stepped closer to the door. I leaned in. I could hear faint sounds coming from inside. The muffled dialogue of a television show. Strings playing. British accents. It was Bridgerton. Baby Cat was watching. I stood in the hallway outside Unit 1417. The Bridgerton music was muffled but clear. I pulled the door shut tight behind me. The click echoed in the corridor. I took a breath. My hands were shaking. I pulled my black Amex from my wallet. The titanium felt cold in my hand. I watched a YouTube video about bypassing deadbolts years ago. I slid the card into the gap between the door and the frame. I angled it up. I wiggled it. The latch clicked. I turned the handle. The door swung open silently. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The air in here smelled like lemon cleaner and vanilla. It was quiet. The TV had been paused on a scene of people dancing. I stood in the entryway. My eyes scanned the room. As an architect, I appreciated the layout, open concept, clean lines, expensive finishes. But as a wife, I felt sick. The living room was pristine, white sofa, glass table, abstract art. There were no magazines, no clutter, no signs of life. It looked like a showroom model or a movie set. I walked over to the coffee table. The surface was flawless. Not a single fingerprint. I ran my finger along the edge. It was cold. This wasn't a home. It was a container for a lie. I moved toward the kitchen. The lights were undermounted. They cast a soft glow on the quartz counter. I saw a bowl of green apples, perfectly arranged like a prop. And then I saw the refrigerator. It was the only thing in the room that looked messy. It was covered in photos, held up by magnets shaped like tiny cacti. I walked closer. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. I stopped in front of the fridge. I reached out and touched a picture. It was a photo of Sterling and her, Catalina. They were standing under a neon sign. It said the Little White Chapel. He was wearing a tuxedo. She was in a white lace dress. They were laughing. They looked happy. I pulled the photo off the door. The frame was cold. I looked at the date written on the bottom corner in gold pen. November 12th. I froze. The blood drained from my face. I know that date. I was in Chicago. I was at the AIA National Conference. I remember calling him from the hotel bar. I asked him how the fishing trip was going. He told me the salmon were running. He told me he loved me. He told me he missed me. He was lying. He wasn't in a river. He was in a wedding chapel. He was promising to love, honor, and cherish her. While I was sitting alone in a hotel room, worrying about my keynote speech, I looked at the other photos. A shot of them cutting a cake. A shot of them kissing by a fountain. He was wearing a ring on his left hand. I bought him that ring for our 10th anniversary. He gave it to her. It wasn't just an affair, it was a replacement. If you've ever found out a secret like this, you know the feeling. It's like the floor drops out from under you. Tell me in the comments, would you have stayed to look at the rest? Because I couldn't move. They weren't just dating, they were married in Vegas. I checked the date on the photo. I was at a conference in Chicago that weekend. He told me he was going fishing. I could hear them shifting on the white leather sofa. The TV was paused on a scene of a Regency ballroom. I was trapped in a kitchen that looked like a high-end showroom. The air smelled like green apples and chemical vanilla perfume. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew I had to move. If I stayed there frozen, I was the sitting duck. I stepped back slowly. My sneakers squeaked on the polished marble floor. I froze completely. The sound seemed to echo in the high-ceilinged silence. Nobody moved in the living room. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My eyes scanned the room frantically for a place to hide or a way out. That's when I saw the entry table, a slab of white walnut near the door. On top of it, a stack of mail. Not piled up in a mess, but stacked neatly. Organized, just like Sterling. I walked over on tiptoes. I grabbed the top envelope. It was heavy, thick paper texture, official. I flipped it over. It wasn't a utility bill. It wasn't a credit card offer. It was a property deed. King County Recorder's Office, property transfer document. My eyes scanned the legal text at the top. Then I saw the names. They hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Grantee, Catalina Reyes. And right below it, Sterling Whitfield. Joint tenants with rights of survivorship. My knees almost buckled. It wasn't just an affair, it was a legal partnership. They owned this condo together. In the eyes of the state, they were a unit. Bigamy. That was the word floating in my brain. But then I saw the numbers at the bottom of the page. Purchase price, $850,000, and the payment method listed below it. Paid in full. Cash. Do you know how much liquid cash we have? I do. I balance the checkbooks every Sunday. We didn't have $850,000 in cash. Not even close. Then the memory hit me like a truck. The quarterly statement from 3 months ago. The one Sterling intercepted before I could see it. He said the market tanked. He said the fund was down 40%. My father's trust fund. The money that was supposed to be my safety net. My retirement. My legacy. He didn't lose it in the market. He moved it. He bought a condo for his other wife. I heard the clink of a glass from the living room. Sterling was pouring a drink. While I stood here staring at his theft, it made me sick. I looked down at the deed in my hand again. This wasn't just emotional betrayal. It was theft. Grand larceny on a massive scale. I shoved the paper into my coat pocket. My hands were trembling so hard I almost dropped it. I turned toward the front door. The deadbolt stared back at me. I needed to leave before the math didn't just stop adding up. I needed to get out before I exploded. $850,000 cash. We didn't have that kind of liquidity. Unless he liquidated the trust fund my father left me. I reached for the deadbolt, my hand shaking violently. But then I saw it, the silver glow of the MacBook on the coffee table. It wasn't sleeping. The screen was awake. The business folder was open. The one he never let me touch. It was right there. Do you know that temptation? The kind that makes your blood pound in your ears? I told myself to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I stepped closer to the white sofa. The leather was cold under my fingertips. I looked at the screen. A spreadsheet. Columns of numbers moving like dark water. Dates? October, November, December. My father's trust fund. The account number matched the one I memorized as a kid. The one Sterling said was diversified. He lied. I saw the transfer lines. Wire to Sterling Whitfield Brokerage. Then the split. Cashier's check, 4491. Then the final destination. The Sovereign Condominium Association. $850,000. My inheritance. Gone. Just like that. My breath hitched in my throat. It felt like inhaling broken glass. He didn't just buy a condo. He drained my family's legacy to build a shrine to his lies. I scrolled down. There was a scanned document, a transfer authorization form. My name was at the bottom. Zora Beaumont. The signature was perfect. Too perfect. It looked just like mine. But the date? The date was October 12th. I was in Chicago. I was at the AIA conference. I was 3,000 miles away. Have you ever seen your signature on something you never signed? It's violating. It makes you feel sick to your stomach. He forged it. He actually forged it. I clicked another tab, a folder named Project Cat. Inside, receipts, furniture, the TV, even that ridiculous green apple bowl. He itemized his affair like a construction bid. There were receipts for vanilla candles, high thread count sheets, a bill for a romantic dinner at the Pink Door, every dollar, every cent. He treated my life like a load-bearing wall he could just remove. Structural integrity is gone. The math didn't. It never did. Then I saw the PDF. Certificate of Marriage. Clark County, Nevada. November 12th. Sterling Whitfield and Catalina Reyes. Witnessed by some guy named Elvis. I checked the clock on the wall. 4:35 a.m. The cursor blinked at me, mocking my hesitation. The smell of that vanilla perfume was stronger here by the desk. I needed this. I needed proof. I pulled a thumb drive from my pocket. I always carry one for CAD files. I plugged it in. The USB clicked into place. The file transfer started. 1%, 2%. The progress bar was agonizingly slow. Come on. The silence in the apartment was deafening. I could hear the refrigerator humming. I opened my email. I attached the screenshot, send. Then I hit print on the marriage certificate. The printer in the corner whirred to life. Suddenly, the water pressure changed. The shower stopped. My heart jumped into my throat. I ripped the drive out. A single sheet of paper slid into the tray. I snatched it. It was warm to the touch. The floorboards creaked. Heavy steps. From the bedroom. Then the voice. "Cat, you seen my phone?" I froze. He was coming. I had the deed. I had the proof. But I was trapped. I squeezed myself into the walk-in closet just as the front door opened. My back pressed against the cedar wall. The space was cramped, filled with her scent. Vanilla. Chemical sweet. I held the thumb drive tight in my sweating palm. The marriage certificate was crinkled in my pocket. Footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor. 2 sets, one heavy, one light. They were in the bedroom now. I could see them through the louvered doors. Sterling stood by the bed we'd never shared. His back was to me. A woman's voice cut through the silence. "Did you get the transfer done?" It was her. Catalina. "It's all taken care of," Sterling said. "Just like I promised. You know that feeling when your reality fractures? When the foundation you built your life on just dissolves? That was me. In the closet, listening to my husband plot his exit with another woman. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I bit down on my fist to stay silent. "The audit is scheduled for next week," Sterling continued. "By the time they find it, we'll be gone." "You said we'd be in Costa Rica by then," she replied. "I need to know this is real." The Costa Rica plan. There it was. He'd been planning this for months. Every dollar he stole was funding their escape. "You don't have to worry about her anymore," Sterling said. "I told you the divorce papers were filed months ago." Divorce papers? What divorce papers? I hadn't signed a single thing. My blood ran cold. He was lying to her, too. Playing both sides of the house. Then I heard the words that broke me completely. "What about the baby, Sterling? I can't do this with a newborn if you're still married to her." My knees buckled. I sank down onto the closet floor, surrounded by her shoes and coats. 15 years of marriage. I always thought children just weren't in the cards for us. He told me he didn't want them. He said his work was too demanding. Said we had too much to lose. He didn't want children with Emmy. He was starting over, building a new foundation on my ruins, using materials he stole from iLife. I looked at the shoes lined up perfectly in front of me. Louboutins, Manilows, bought with my inheritance money. High thread count sheets, vanilla candles. Every single thing in this apartment was paid for by my father's trust fund. The baby will be fine, Sterling said. Costa Rica is beautiful. Private. Nobody will ever find us there. The condo is sold, he continued. The cash kits are offshore account on Friday, then we fly out Saturday. Friday. 2 days away, he was going to vanish before I even knew what hit me. If I hadn't found the Netflix profile. If I hadn't gone to the storage unit, if I hadn't come here tonight, I would have woken up alone, bankrupt, replaced. What if she finds the paperwork? Catalina asked. She's not stupid, Sterling. She's going to notice the money's gone. She's too wrapped up in her work to notice anything, he laughed. Besides, she thinks the trust is tied up in the market. She won't even check until the quarterly statement. I'm an architect. I know about load-bearing walls. Sterling just removed every single one from my life without me noticing. And then he told me the building was still standing. I felt something shift inside me. The shock crystallized into something sharp, something cold, something dangerous. I looked at the thumb drive in my hand. All the evidence, every transaction, every lie, the forged signature, the second marriage, the theft. It was all there. Every single brick he used to build his new life. I stood up slowly. My legs were steady now. My hands stopped shaking. I'm not a victim of structural collapse. I am the person who inspects the wreckage. I am the person who finds the flaw. Are you sure? Catalina asked. Because if she finds out, don't worry, she'll never know. By the time the audit is done, we'll be in Costa Rica. That's when I stepped out of the closet. I took one step out of the closet, then another. My heels clicked on the white walnut floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. Sterling froze. His coffee mug hovered halfway to his mouth. He looked like a building that had just lost its foundation. Catalina jumped. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. I could see her pulse hammering in her throat. Zora? Sterling choked out. His voice cracked. What are you? How did you? I didn't answer. I just walked into the light. The air smelled like vanilla candles and Sterling's expensive cologne. It was suffocating. I felt the rage rising in my chest like high tide. But I stayed cold. An architect doesn't panic when the steel beams snap. She evacuates. You know that feeling when you realize the person you love is actually a stranger? That was me standing there. Except I didn't feel sad. I felt powerful. I walked to the glass coffee table. There was a bowl of green apples sitting there. So domestic. So perfect. I reached into my pocket. My fingers brushed the metal thumb drive. It was still cold from the closet air. I pulled out the folded document instead. The forged deed. Sterling tried to step forward. He put on that face. The patronizing one he uses with junior associates. Zora, please, he said. It's complicated. You don't understand the situation. I laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound. No, Sterling. The math is actually very simple. Catalina looked between us. She was clutching a throw pillow. Her knuckles were white. Sterling? She asked. Her voice was shaking. What is going on? Who is she? I watched him try to calculate his exit strategy. He looked at the door. He looked at the window. He looked at me. I slammed the paper onto the table. The apples rattled. One rolled off the edge and hit the rug. Catalina flinched. I smoothed the paper out with a trembling hand. I forced my hand to be still. King County property transfer, I read aloud. $850,000 paid in cash. Catalina stared at the document. Her eyes went wide. You said you sold the stocks, she whispered to him. You said it was your bonus. Sterling held up his hands. It's just a timing thing, Kat. Zora's confused. She's having a breakdown. She's under so much stress at the firm. I looked at him. Really looked at him. A bead of sweat was rolling down his temple. He knew. He knew I wasn't confused. I want you to guess what he did next. Because his reaction told me everything I needed to know about his character. It wasn't a bonus, I said. My voice was low. Dangerous. It was my inheritance, my father's trust fund, the one you told me tanked in the market last year. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Catalina looked at her stomach. Then she looked at me. The horror was spreading across her face. She was realizing she wasn't the victim of a messy breakup. She was the victim of a con. Sterling reached for my arm. His grip was tight, desperate. "Zora, honey, let's go outside. We can talk about this privately. Don't do this in front of her." I pulled my arm away. His touch felt like acid on my skin. "Don't touch me," I said. "Don't ever touch me again." I turned to face Catalina. She looked so small on that white sofa. She looked terrified. She looked exactly like I did 15 years ago, before I knew what he really was. I looked at Catalina and said, "He didn't tell you? He stole my inheritance to buy this apartment for you. And because he's still married to me, this property is half mine." Sterling looked like a man watching his own building collapse. He reached out to touch my shoulder. I stepped back into the hallway. "Don't touch me," I said. My voice was ice. He turned to Catalina. "Baby, you have to understand. The trust fund, it was a complicated transfer." He was using money terms to cover up theft. Typical. Catalina just stared at him. Her face was pale. She looked at the deed on the table. Then she looked at me. The math was finally mathing for her. You know that feeling when the ground just drops out from under you? That was Catalina. She was realizing her foundation was built on sand. Sterling tried to grab my hand again. "Zora, please, let me fix this. Just give me an hour to explain." I looked at his sweaty face. I saw the panic in his eyes. He thought he could negotiate his way out of a felony. I decided to let him think that. I needed to get out of there. I needed to bring in the heavy machinery. So I dropped my shoulders. I made my eyes go wide and watery. I faked the breakdown he was expecting. "I can't," I whispered. I can't be here right now." It was an Academy Award performance. Sterling exhaled. He thought he had dodged the bullet. He thought I was running away to cry in my car. "Go home, Zora," he said gently. "We'll talk later. I'll fix this." "Sure you will, Sterling." I turned and walked to the front door. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was from adrenaline. I opened the heavy black door. The hallway air smelled like eucalyptus and disinfectant. I pressed the elevator button. The door slid open instantly. I stepped inside. I saw the reflection in the polished steel walls. I looked small, defeated, but inside, I was steel. The doors closed. I was alone. I reached into my coat pocket. My fingers brushed the thumb drive. It was still there, the USB key that held his entire life on it. I walked out of the lobby and onto the rainy street. The Seattle rain was coming down hard, cold and relentless. I didn't go to my car. I needed eyes on the building. I needed a witness position. There was a coffee shop on the corner of Broadway and Thomas. I walked inside. The smell of roasted beans hit me. I ordered a black coffee. No room for cream. I took a seat by the window. The rain was streaking the glass. Across the street, the gold entrance of the Sovereign gleamed. I pulled out my phone. I went to my contacts. I found Detective Miller. We had worked together on the downtown embezzlement case last year. He owed me a favor. I typed the message carefully. My thumb hit the screen with authority. "Location, the Sovereign, Unit 1417. Suspect in residence. Evidence of fraud and bigamy on laptop. Probable cause for theft of F-150K. It's all there. Seize it now." I hit send. The little delivered checkmark appeared. I leaned back in the chair and took a sip of my coffee. It was hot, bitter, perfect. I checked the time. 3:42 p.m. I watched the revolving doors of the condo building. People were walking by with umbrellas. The city was moving, and honestly, I want you to guess what happened when those cops knocked on the door, because nobody was expecting the Detective Miller show. Then I heard the sirens. Faint at first, then getting louder. They weren't the normal sirens. These were the sharp, aggressive wails of a rapid response. I saw the first cruiser turn the corner, lights flashing, blue and red against the gray glass of the lobby. Then a second one, and a third. They screeched to a halt right in front of the valet stand. 2 officers jumped out. They ran for the entrance. I didn't go home. I went to a coffee shop and watched the police cars pull up to the Sovereign from across the street. I pressed my phone against the cold glass of the coffee shop window. It was finally happening. Rain streaked down the pane, blurring the lights of Broadway into neon watercolors. My latte was untouched on the table. It had gone cold an hour ago, just like my marriage. You know that feeling when you wait for a shoe to drop? And when it finally does, the silence is louder than the crash? That was this moment. 3 Seattle PD cruisers pulled up to the curb. No sirens, just the sudden, violent flash of blue and red against the gray concrete. People on the street stopped. Umbrellas paused. Everyone was staring at the grand entrance of the Sovereign. I knew that entrance. I had selected the limestone cladding myself 8 years ago. It was supposed to be a masterpiece of modern design. Now it was just the backdrop to his arrest. I zoomed in with my camera. The recording light was blinking red. 2 officers jogged up the steps. They didn't hesitate. They knew exactly which unit they were going to. Unit 1417. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was steady. A slow, rhythmic beat. A metronome ticking down the final seconds of Sterling Whitfield's freedom. 10 minutes passed. It felt like an hour. I watched the lobby doors slide open. They brought him out first. Sterling, my husband, he didn't look like a successful architect. He didn't look like the man who had lied to me for 15 years. His hands were cuffed behind his back, silver steel against his charcoal suit jacket. His tie was loosened. His hair was a mess. He looked like a fraud, because that is exactly what he was. They guided him toward the second cruiser. He stumbled on the wet pavement. An officer grabbed his arm to steady him. And then Sterling did what narcissists always do. He started looking around. He scanned the crowd. He looked at the witnesses. He looked at the cars. He was searching for a lawyer. Or maybe he was looking for me? I zoomed in tight on his face. The video captured every pore, every bead of sweat. He turned his head sharply toward the coffee shop. Did he see me? I didn't move. I was just a silhouette in a dark window. A ghost watching the demolition. You have to understand, they weren't arresting him for bigamy. That is just a messy civil issue. They were arresting him for federal wire fraud, for grand larceny, for forging my signature on a $2 million trust fund transfer. Detective Miller had the thumb drive. He had the spreadsheets. He had the forged documents I copied from his laptop. Structural integrity is gone, and the entire house of cards just collapsed. I watched them push his head down as they put him in the back seat. The door slammed shut. The sound echoed off the buildings. It was the loudest thing I have ever heard. Then the lobby doors opened again. Catalina came out. She wasn't in handcuffs. She was walking slowly. She was crying. Her hands were clutching her stomach, protecting the baby. She looked so small on that massive sidewalk, like a doll left out in the Seattle rain. She looked terrified. Confused? She looked at the police car. Then she looked at the ground. She really didn't know. She really believed the money came from bonuses. She really believed he was a good man. The math didn't math for her either. I took a sip of my ice-cold coffee. It tasted bitter, just like this entire situation. I almost felt bad for her in that moment. She was just another victim of his pathology. Then I remembered she was living in my house, sleeping on my sheets, eating food bought with my father's inheritance. Catalina came out crying, clutching her stomach. I almost felt bad for her. Then I remembered she was living in my house on my dime. I want to know what you think. Tell me in the comments, did she deserve sympathy or was she part of the con? 2 days after the arrest, I sat in a conference room on the 40th floor. The city looked gray through the floor-to-ceiling glass. Just like my future. My lawyer Marcus slid a thick stack of papers across the mahogany table. They were the divorce filings. The official caption read, "Cause of action, bigamy, and fraud." He tapped a highlighted section with his index finger. It was page 4, the financial forfeiture clause. I stared at the document. The font was crisp, 12-point Times New Roman. It listed the trust fund transfer, $2 million, gone. Sterling didn't just cheat, he engineered a structural collapse. I looked at my hands. They were resting on the cool wood. My cuticles were bitten down to the quick. A nervous habit I thought I'd kicked years ago. The air conditioning hummed in the background. A low, sterile drone. Marcus asked if I was ready to sign. I picked up the pen. It was a Mont Blanc. Heavy black resin. It felt cold in my grip. I scratched my signature on the line. Zora Beaumont. The ink looked dark, wet, permanent. Structural integrity was gone. But the foundation was still mine. I was building something new on top of the rubble. You ever have to sign away 15 years of your life in 5 seconds? It's a strange sensation. like a phantom limb. Marcus took the paper and slipped it into a yellow manila folder. He started talking about freezing the assets, the condo on Broadway, the secret apartment, the cash in the offshore accounts, the vintage Porsche. He said the recovery would take years, maybe decades. I just nodded. I sipped my coffee. It was cold and bitter. I don't care about the timeline anymore. The math didn't math. But now we have the receipts. He kept listing things. The Italian furniture, the abstract art. I watched the rain hit the window. Little blurs of gray water streaking the glass. Then he asked about the house. Our house in Queen Anne. The one Sterling bought for us. The one with the water view. He adjusted his glasses. Do you want to liquidate the property? It might be easier to move on. I looked out at the Space Needle. It looks small from here. Sterling always hated that view. He said it was too exposed, too modern. I turned back to Marcus. I felt something shift in my chest. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. I told him no, I'm not selling, I'm going to renovate, I'm going to redesign every single room he ever stepped foot in. I'm tearing down the load-bearing walls he liked so much. I'm changing the flow of the entire floor plan. Every time he walks into a room in his mind, I want it to be unrecognizable. I'm taking the master bedroom, the kitchen, the den. I'm going to reclaim my space brick by brick. He took my life. But I'm taking the house back. I walked into the Queen Anne house and the silence hit me first. It was a physical weight. I dropped my keys on the entry table. They made a sharp clatter against the marble. No one came to see who it was. No footsteps on the stairs, just the echo. I walked into the living room. The rain was sheeting down the windows. The Seattle gray was blurring the city lights below. I sat down on the sofa. It felt too big for just me. I set my glass of Cabernet on the coffee table. A red ring formed on the coaster. I opened my laptop. The blue light washed over my face. I typed in the URL. Netflix. The screen loaded. There they were. The 3 faces lined up in a row. First, there was me. A photo from our anniversary trip to Paris. Next to me, Sterling. A generic gray silhouette. And there she was, baby cat. That crudely drawn cat with the big green eyes. It looked like a child's drawing. It looked innocent. But it wasn't. It was a Trojan horse. I stared at that icon. It was just a few lines of code, but it represented the collapse of my entire life. If you've ever found a digital receipt you weren't supposed to see, you know this feeling. Your stomach drops. Your hands go cold. I remembered the IP address logs, the late night viewings, the timestamps that didn't match his work schedule. It was all right there in that icon. I took a sip of wine. It was bitter but grounding. I moved the cursor. The arrow hovered over the pencil icon in the corner. I clicked. The Manage Profiles menu slid down. The trash can icon appeared next to Baby Cat. Are you sure? The screen asked. I didn't blink. I clicked the trash can. Poof! She was gone. The row of profiles shifted. Sora and Sterling, side by side. Just like it used to be, or just like I thought it was. But then I looked at his profile again. I hovered over his silhouette. I looked at his My List. The Big Short. Madoff. Inside Job. He had been watching documentaries about white-collar crime. Was he researching, or was he laughing at us? The math didn't math. I want you to tell me something in the comments. Do you think he was arrogant enough to think he wouldn't get caught, or was he just that stupid? I moved the cursor one last time. Over the gray silhouette, I clicked the trash can. Are you sure? Yes, I am sure. Gone. The screen reloaded, just one icon in the center of the screen. Sora, it looked lonely, but the structural integrity of the account was finally restored. I looked out the window at the Space Needle. It was glowing in the mist. I deleted his profile too. It's just Zora now, and honestly, the key looks better without his suggestions. If this story hit you as hard as it hit me to tell it, I need you to do something for me. Turn on notifications, because I'm not done rebuilding yet. Drop a like if you made it to the end of this chapter, and leave a comment. Tell me what you would have deleted first. I got the text 3 days after the arrest. It was 7 a.m. I was standing in the gutted kitchen of the Queen Anne house. The smell of sawdust was thick in the air. My phone buzzed on the granite counter. An unknown number. I almost ignored it. But then I read the preview. It's Catalina. I need to give you something. My heart stopped. The other wife. The victim. The woman I hated. I agreed to meet her, but I set the terms. Public place, daytime. I chose a small cafe in Belltown. Rain was battering the windows when I walked in. She was in the back corner. She looked different without the Instagram filters. Her face was pale, dark circles under her eyes. She wore a loose gray sweater to hide the bump. She didn't have a lawyer. She didn't have a list of demands. She just had a black leather moleskin notebook. Sterling's journal. She slid it across the table. The cover was worn. He wrote everything in this, she said. Plans, schedules, lies. I didn't know, she whispered. About you. About the money. I thought he was divorced. I believed her. You see that look in someone's eyes? That hollow, shattered look? I see it in the mirror every morning. Have you ever felt like someone was playing 4D chess with your life while you were just trying to survive the day? I opened the book, the binding cracked. The smell of his cologne wafted up. Expensive leather and sandalwood. It made me sick. I turned to the page she had marked with a red flag. The date made my hand shake. October 13th, 2 days before I found the baby cat profile. I started reading. The handwriting was precise, architectural, just like his blueprints. He wrote, the structure of the marriage is failing. The guilt is compromising my performance. I cannot file for divorce. It looks bad. I lose leverage. I need Zora to pull the trigger. He titled the section Operation Passive Exit. Then the paragraph that broke me. Tomorrow I will leave the iPad unlocked. I will ensure the baby cat profile is visible on the login screen. It is a calculated risk. If she sees it, she investigates. If she investigates, she finds the condo. She finds the fraud. She will be forced to act. She will file. She will be the one to end it. I remain the victim of a chaotic ex-wife. I stared at the page. The letters swam. I couldn't breathe. He analyzed me like a building he was preparing to implode. Zora's logical. Once she sees the data point the profile, she will run the simulation. She will find the anomaly. She will conclude that the foundation is rotten. He trusted my intelligence to destroy us. He used my own brain against me. I looked at Catalina. She was staring at the rain running down the glass. He said I was the only thing that made sense, she said. But we were just load-bearing walls to him. Structural supports for his ego. And when he was done building his new life, he just weakened the supports. He waited for the collapse. He wanted to get caught. He was too cowardly to leave, so he left a trail of breadcrumbs big enough for a blind woman to follow. He used me to escape his own life. I sat on the sawhorse for a long time. The journal was open in my lap. Page 42, Operation Passive Exit. He wrote it like he was writing a spec for a client. He analyzed my neuroses. He calculated my reaction times. He bet that I would find the Netflix profile. He bet I would tear his life apart. The math was supposed to work in his favor. He wanted to be the victim of my rage. He wanted to be the one who walked away because I was unstable. But he forgot one variable. I am an architect. I know structural failure when I see it. I know when a foundation is compromised beyond repair. So I stood up. I walked to the center of the kitchen. The sunlight was hitting the granite counter. It looked perfect. Just like our life used to look. Perfect on the surface, rotting underneath. I picked up the sledgehammer. It was a 10-pound maul. The handle was bright yellow. The head was cast iron. I felt the weight of it in my hands. It felt heavier than the lies. It felt heavier than the forged deeds. I walked over to the archway. This was the archway Sterling loved. He used to lean against it and sip his coffee. He would lecture me about flow and dynamics. He didn't know a thing about flow. I planted my boots on the subfloor. I tightened my grip on the rubber handle. I took a deep breath. I smelled sawdust and the faint scent of the drywall. I exhaled and I swung. The iron hit the drywall with a sickening crunch. The shockwave vibrated all the way up to my shoulders. It felt electric. A cloud of white powder exploded into the air. I didn't cover my face. I wanted to taste it. I wanted to breathe it in. I swung again. This time the hammer punched through. I saw the wooden studs behind the paper. I saw the pink insulation stuffing. It looked ugly. It looked raw. It looked real. You know that feeling when you finally break something that's been holding you hostage? It is the best feeling in the world. I kept swinging. I wasn't thinking about Sterling. I wasn't thinking about Catalina. I wasn't thinking about the $2 million. I was just thinking about the load, the weight I had been carrying for 15 years. Every time he lied, every time he gaslit me, every time he disappeared, I put it all into the swing. Crack. The plaster shattered. Dust coated my glasses. My hair was turning white. My arms were burning. But I didn't stop. The wall was gone. It was just a pile of debris on the floor. The space was open. The light from the window flooded into the hallway. It was brighter than it had ever been. I dropped the hammer. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. I looked at the mess. I looked at the exposed pipes. I looked at the wiring. Sterling is in a jail cell right now. He is probably plotting his next move. He is probably writing another script in his head. But he can't touch me here. He can't touch the design. The forensic accountants are stripping his assets. The lawyers are handling the bigamy charge. And I am handling the reconstruction. I am going to knock down every wall he touched. I am going to rip up the floors he walked on. I am going to build a fortress, a place where the math always works, where the structural integrity is absolute, where there are no secrets in the studs. I looked down at my hands. They were covered in white dust. They were shaking. But they were my hands. Not his. Not a victim's. Mine. I'm Zora Beaumont. I'm an architect, and I know how to build a fortress where he can never get back in. If you've made it to the end of this story with me, thank you for listening. I know this was a heavy one, but these stories need to be told. If the story hit you, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I have more stories to tell. And trust me, I've seen it all. Drop a like if you made it to the end. And please, leave a comment. Tell me what you would have done with that sledgehammer. I read every single one.